And the American philosopher Vernon Howard said the man who does not know what it means to be under psychic hypnosis is probably already under it.
This is a typical variations in some of the patterns that that we've now discovered, that the brain is really like a fluid. It's changing with the electromagnetic fields of Schumann's resonance. I'm going to suggest a second thing that we have not yet discussed that I'm ready to write Nexus on, called microtubule. It was used originally when I worked in anesthesiology at the University of Washington. That was my cover where I worked. They stuck us in anesthesiology, and that's where we started our works. And the lab next to mine had the monkey with the chips in its head, and the lab on the other side was doing ketamine, telepathine, and BZ studies. I'm not even going to talk to you about what I was doing. My wife has written a book called, a paper called I Married the Wizard of Oz, where she runs down some of the work she saw me do in Army intelligence. And she's now doing some follow-up research with Dr. Carl Schleicher, MRU, and some of the people I associated with. And that, stay tuned on that. That'll be a real interesting thing, because I didn't even know who I was working for. You know, I'm as curious to find out what she discovers as you might be. When they use people like me, they never gave us full disclosure. Even when we were at the top end of the pyramid, we never had a clue what was really going on. And so, and there were a number of us, Bearden, others that you've probably heard of. We were all part of a team, if you will, with the advances in concepts. We were like 20 and 30 years ahead of what's being published right now. And what I'm trying to do is I'm being brought out of retirement to end my years with my swan songs of going back to the physics that I used to do. Unfortunately, I don't have the toys I used to, so I will call myself an armchair physicist now. I'm not a physicist with big toys like atom smashers and, you know, the big toys. But I have access to people that are, and so we're doing some interesting research on how the brain really works.
They've limited Earth's consciousness by forcing low vibration souls in here for so long. While it's been going through denser and denser, Earth has little choice but to allow that to happen. It has to have life on it, has to nurture life, even if it's low vibration. So they knew how a planet would grow and ascend and descend. They knew all of this, and they're using that to their best of advantage.
You know, first of all, I don't care if you're a drug trafficker, okay? That's fine, okay? I mean, somebody's got to bring the drugs into this country. We've been, as a human race, using drugs for like 50,000 years. So the only reason to make drugs illegal is to put people in jail, or making it illegal, raise the price 6 times. Okay? So if you want to bring drugs in the country and be an entrepreneur, hey, fine. Okay? But the problem is there's 2 million people in prison here in this country for selling small amounts of what these guys are bringing in by the ton. And maybe most of those guys, like, are not the greatest character references people in the world. Okay? You know what? They've all got moms. Yeah. And I know how my mom would feel if I got sent to prison. So imagine the untold human misery that this basic hypocrisy, puts us through. But the reason it's still there is because of the vast amounts of money to be made.
There is something, Terence, that a lot of people probably are not comfortable with, and that is somebody who, in his lifetime, has ingested as much LSD, this new drug of yours, DMT, and God knows what else, probably a lot, is not supposed to sound as articulate and as literate and as well-preserved mentally as you do. And many people who are allies in the war on drugs probably hate your guts.
Well, you wanted me to defend clarity?
I mean, well, no.
What can I say? In other words, first of all, My life of drug exploration and drug taking is, as you say, broad and deep, never reckless, always with a deep interest in analyzing each experience before moving on to the next one. None of the psychedelic drugs are drugs of addiction. That is a whole different category of drugs, which I am not particularly interested in defending. I do think it's one of the great tragedies of 20th century American society that we have created a generation gap or several and criminalized much of our middle class by taking substances which other cultures had no problem coming to terms with.
All right, let me stop you and ask you right there about that. You mentioned drugs of addiction, which you don't defend. Fine. Psychedelic drugs, Terence, why are they illegal?
They're illegal because the people who take them tend to question established cultural values. That's absolutely why they're illegal. No matter whether you're a Hasid or a Communist Party official in North Korea or a government or church official in Brazil, if you take psychedelics, you will ask yourself, does my life and what I do make sense?
Do you mean that, for example, a psychedelic experience could turn a communist against communism?
Absolutely, I think it could. I think in many cases it did. How could the idea of atheistic materialism maintain itself in the face of the counter-evidence of the psychedelic experience? What the psychedelic experience is saying, essentially, is that everything is connected in a way that is not woo-woo or emotional, but actually palpable, and therefore our actions have consequences. Now, most political agendas deny their consequences. So, for instance, Marxism had this theory of how human beings are that was so off base that eventually it had to be pitched out. Consumer capitalism has a theory of human beings and what constitutes their happiness that looks pretty hollow from the point of view of the psychedelic experience. I think, postmodern ideologies, Marxism, consumerism, so forth and so on, have based all their planning on an assumption of the absence of spirit. And in fact, this is not true. There is a spiritual dimension to humanness that cannot be denied. Now, it can certainly be distorted, and that's another side of things. But I think the search for psychedelic experiences represents a genuine religious impulse, especially when pursued at the dose levels I recommend. This is not this is not party recreational stuff. The phrase recreational drugs is an effort to trivialize this, and I think for one reason, I don't think the government is ready for a full airing of the constitutional contradictions that are contained in suppressing people's genuine wish to use psychedelic substances for genuine purposes of religious Because I take psychedelics so seriously, I can't imagine them ever being really legal unless there's a total social transformation, because my analysis of it is the reason everybody from a Marxist state to a Christian oligarchy to a high-tech industrial democracy can get together and agree that psychedelics are a terrible, terrible thing is because the social effect of psychedelics being taken by large numbers of people is a kind of deconditioning from the cultural myths, whatever they are. It's no knock on any given society. It's just that if people start taking psychedelics, they start questioning what they've been told about reality. And culture is in the business of keeping you inside a set of predetermined answers to those questions.
Well, based on that, then, adherence, perhaps legalization day is 2012.
Well, there you go, Art. There's an apocalypse that would shake our world and leave the heavens intact.
The day that drug war ends.
Okay, next caller, you're on your name and where you're calling from.
Yeah, my name is Robert, and I'm from Holland.
Hi, Robert from Holland. Can you speak up a little bit? It's hard to hear you.
A friend of mine advised me to contact you because you had some abilities to see into past lives and stuff like that.
Yes.
I was just curious, and I was just, look for a way to connect to you and see what we can work out with this.
Okay. Have you ever heard me do these before? Is this your first time?
My first time.
First time. Did you hear me do any other previous readings today, or you just call it?
Just heard a little bit of the previous call you had, but that was it.
Okay. What I need you to do is tell me your first 10 minutes of the day when you woke up, from the moment that you rubbed your eyes till you got out of your bed, and compact that 10 minutes to 40 seconds and say it out loud, and I'll tune into your dream energies.
All right. The first 10 minutes when I woke up, I remembered an experience I had last night, because last night I smoked DMT.
Okay.
And it brought me back to source consciousness, and it showed me a lot of layers.
All right, you don't need to say anymore. I've tuned into you. Actually, I dreamed you last night.
Okay.
When you enter the DMT world, you enter the shamanic world. You had gone to the North Pole, and in the North Pole, the spiritual experiences you were looking for is you were looking to unite to the dreamtime mind of Earth Mother, and the DMT was your gateway to that. As you began to connect to that experience, you began to go through the cycling death of life, death, and rebirth for the shaman within. You've asked me to look at your past lives. Well, right now, your past lives go very, very, very far back. You are a very ancient and a very old soul. So old that you were here before the forces of domination and control. You were here before the 12 teleportations of our world. You were here at the very founding of Earth Mother's soul. So you know, the day that this planet was formed, you were here as the first Amoebic life, as part of the very first soul group. So you're extremely old and extremely connected to Earth. What is now cycling through you is the process of being the shaman or being the human, the process of being the whale or being the shaman, the process of being the whale-shaman-human dreamtime hybrid that you are now. You're connected to that of the whales and the record keepers of this world. Your very voice connects to the Akashic records of Earth because you are linked to her as part of a record keeper. You have shared the prayer pipe of inner peace with many forms of Earth's life forms. But now you're coming to this time where the inner peace is not sought for you. It is not interactive with you, and you are acquiring to need chemicals and additional stimulus to enter this peace, because the very ground you're on right now is polarized in a way that is not bringing you the Earth Mother's energy. The ground itself is asking you to find your cycle and hour of power so you may claim your soul right, so you may understand the illumination that's coming to you from this world. As I look deeper and deeper into your soul, I come to that of the time just before Lemuria. As the very first people were bearing the very first civilization of Lemuria, you stepped out of the shadows as part of a human and said, there is a great forefront for us, a great understanding and clarity for us as a people. We shall call ourselves men of Earth, women of Earth. So you were one of the first voices and said, we are children of Earth. And this message has resonated with thousands and millions of people that began the process of understanding the Lemurian world, its very rise and fall. So what's understanding for you now is the person that is here now, without the chemical, needs to go through what's called the ritual of joy, in which you empower your soul with the power of the laughter, the power of the soul, the power of the smile, connected to your heart space, so they understand that this hour of power is how you claim your honor. It's how you seek the vision quest. It's how you find your soul purpose. Because right now you're searching for the soul purpose over and over and over and over again. And it's not within your past lives to find it. It is within the present life. You have been planning this lifetime for a very long time. There are skills that you must take time to learn so you may manifest the hour of power and have the actual skill of vision.
If you go back to, for example, the ancient Egyptian religious tradition, their whole concern really was with preparation for the afterlife.
That's right.
This involved intense spiritual journeys, which had to be made so that one could have experiences that would actually prepare you for the mysterious realms that lie beyond life, and that's where ancient Egypt is gone. We may refer to its books, we may refer to its literature, but the living experience of exploration of other realms, who can we turn to in our world today? Only to the shamans, who do that as part of their daily bread. That is part of their everyday life, is the exploration of other realms. And I often feel that we in the West, in the industrialized, the technological countries, are really children by comparison with the shamans. We're taught to believe that our cultures are so superior because of their technology, but incredibly inferior, in my view, in terms of spiritual exploration. And if we really want to be pilgrims in the truest of senses, then we need to listen to what the shamans have to teach us.
So, the ninth pyramid fortification was the last one.
The
when
last of
Atlantis
the sentients of Atlantis that ultimately knew there was a corruptive force in their incarnation pattern that they could never prevent. That no matter what they did, the volume that was there, no matter what time wars they did, there was no chance for them to go back to the beginning and change it. So the only other choice was to go to the end.
Right, and the end is
Now.
now.
2011 to 2014. This is where all of the 2,300 species that have been doing time wars is manifesting everything that they're doing because they realized they couldn't go back to the beginning and change it, so they had to invest into the future or layers into the future. So all of their propaganda, technology, spirituality stuff all popped up just before the awakening, just before Earth pops out of the densest part and into the lighter part with the rest of the solar system. And Earth has always been this point where souls migrate to it, they migrate away. I call it like, the ducks in the winter, you got, the massive flowing flows of ducks going that way. But Earth is this migration center because it has a graduation timeline that's very impressive. You have 100% free will here, and you come in with a blank mind. It's very important. There are other worlds that you remember all of your past lives. You speak by the time you're 4 months old. We go through this growing process. That's cherished in other worlds.
Well, it seems like it could also be a disability if you're being programmed and manipulated and taken over.
Falling is the first thing I feel. Distant voices echo inside my head. Their orders are clear, and yet all I can think about is the others. Each one traveled the same path. What was their fate? What awaits me on the other side? They have gone to a place where the light is cursed and darkness blinds the soul. This is a place where even angels fear to tread.
And how long have the archons been affecting in the play? If this goes back 52 million years.
Well, 490,000 years ago is essentially when the galactic expansion machine was set up so that they could resolve the 66 prime lines of drama.
Okay.
They came in about 385,000 years ago.
Okay.
And that's after the neutral guys were kicked out. They needed a system of entities that had the God mind, but were still in control.
Oh.
That there was a sentience still control of them, and the God mind inside those archons would never know it. Many of the archons were just high vibrational beings that were captured in other domination and control planets, taken to technological centers, had their bodies removed, their vibration rapidly raised with energy until they're experiencing the unity consciousness of an artificial intelligence that's telling them they're God. Then they're compacted into a little ball of energy and shot across space, smack into our astral realm, and are force incarnated.
Wow.
They then wake up at 2 years of age and say, I'm a God.
Wow.
And then they go out and become a God, and when they finally lose their physical body, they are brought into the astral world and they say, I'm a God. And then the system of domination and control puts them into the court system that allows them to stamp your immigration.
Wow.
And that's where they insert fine print into your contracts. To get into Earth, there's a line of people waiting, quite literally a line.
Okay.
And there's a council of 52 archons over there that read your spiritual contracts and get to put fine print in there, because they're looking at who you're looking for, your mother, your father, your daughters, who's your first grade teacher, who's your first love, who's your first divorce, who's your 11th divorce, so on.
Right.
And they're putting fine print in there to give you negative habit patterns so you never get into your mind and claim your sovereignty.
Right, so they're giving you patterns like addictions and the whole...
Bad relationships, so on, the whole gamut.
Dysfunctional parents, pedophilia, blah, blah, blah.
Yep.
Okay.
It also seems that my practice, of course, there's been a lot of distractions, but my practice seems to get started and then slack off. And a lot in my life has been like that. And when I heard you talking with people, because every time you do consultations with people over the phone, I feel like it's for all of us, and I always it's like you're speaking to me. And you mentioned that sometimes we don't make progress because of the light is not supposed to be. In other words, we don't want to shine too bright, and somehow our spirit guides are keeping us kind of dampered down. But you said that so that we're not discovered or vulnerable, but now that things are changing.
Yes, what I'm referring to is people that come under broken spirit contract rules. They've been able to bypass the rules set up by the incarnation grid of the forces of domination and control. So what they do is they know they will be noticed as a bright, energetic creature that can be drained of energy. So what they do is they screw up their wiring job. So when a creature of domination and control comes around, they don't see this bright, shining light of love and harmony and healing. They see this spaghetti mess of a wiring job and then put you on their list and go on to someone else who's more of a tasty morsel that they can pass on to their masters.
Yeah, when I read the Chuang Tzu about the useless tree metaphor,
yep.
it kind of resonated.
It is exactly that. And it's been around. Spirits have been planning their lives like that for a long time. And they do that so that more powerful soul groups can come in and get an anchor in this reality so they can have more and more lifetimes. And as the true energy of the light and soul comes through, the darkness is forced to have less incarnations here and less incarnations here until finally it's pushed out and the majority expresses its heart love and begins the process of transparent understanding of their species history.
Yes.
Can you talk more about the rewiring process of energy, spirit energy process? All right, rewiring. You have a crown chakra, and you have a left brain and a right brain, and you have a heart chakra. The heart chakra and the brain are interlinked through the spine. So when you go through a wiring process, they go through the brain. That's your camouflage energy of your outer aura. Often your heart and your mind are not in league, And when they are rewiring you, they're getting your heart and your mind in league, in concert, in co-creation motion, so that you're working with all of your being instead of half your being or a third of your being. So the rewiring process is literally connecting your mind to your heart to your root chakra, and reconnecting all 7 of your chakras to the 36 chakras that are above and below your 7 basic chakras. So that's really, really what it is.
I felt as if I've really been reaching out for many years, and nobody shows up.
Well, that's the thing. You're not reaching into the right place. You're not allowing yourself to see the 7 layers beyond the only single layer that you see. And that's because much of your crown chakra was protected, because the Arcturians, when they come in this world, are like shining beacons of light for the forces of domination and control. So once they find them, they take them, they turn them into super soldiers, or they kill them, or they turn them into breeding groups. So
I've been very fortunate here, because in some way I have been totally protected. I'm kind of out of the loop, like as if they couldn't find me.
Right. You're an anchor spirit dug deep into the earth.
Gotcha.
It all relates. As an anchor spirit, you are deeply related to Earth. That means the previous lifetimes you lived here as the weather warrior, as the weather wizard. That just shows how deep your Earth connection is. So when you left, you didn't tell the world your story, which means that the surface world of surface intelligence wasn't prepared for when you came back. So you have a story of spirit to tell, but you got to tell it to yourself first.
I gotcha. Well, this is a beautiful time you're offering me here, because that's my question. It's like I've been realizing that I call it faith, but I'm not looking for faith. I'm looking for the story.
Right.
To connect me to myself.
Right. And that's why I do this 8 hours a week, because I know that every drop I change with each person that I help, that it changes the 7 future generations of the people that are there. I've lived and co-lived and existed in the South Pole and the North Pole at the same time, as a separated dream time and as a unified dream time. So I thoroughly understand the process that people are going through here, and it's just a matter of me having the time to literally translate it to the specific message that person needs. Like you just said, you needed to hear the story, not the faith part behind it.
Only a few of these people with a higher understanding are conscious of where their soul originates from. When entering space and time, they lose their consciousness. By increasing the level of vibration, they will all remember their true identity. While earthquakes and other events increase in intensity, holding the attention of the ordinary world, the extraterrestrials and the chosen ones will complete their spiritual and physical ascension into the 5th dimension. In the next 20 years, groups of people will ascend 3 times and be spiritually removed. Their subatomic vibration will be raised, their universal body activated to such a level that they will no longer experience death or disease. Indeed, death, age, and illness are experiences of duality in 3rd dimension. This spiritual and physical resurrection coincides with our contact with the light ships of the Galactic Federation. The extraterrestrial keepers are observing the process of the ascension of the 6th root race, the seed for the race of Christ, or Bodhisattva.
So the first set of multidimensional beings that had incarnated here became 40% of our breeding population. 15 beings equaled 40% of humanity. At that point, it was nearly 70 billion people on this world. That's a lot of them. Wow. That's how they got soul family status with everyone. Wow. They then brought in dimensional technology that was meant for vessels only and installed it on Earth so that they could take one continent out of a timeline and put it back into a deep, distant timeline, one by one by one by one by one, so they can get to the point to create what's called the first species of Earth. There are 72 first species of Earth, because every time Earth was recaptured, they tried to re-erase the timelines. But once you have sentience that's born, you can't erase the sentience, and Earth has to adopt that as a first species.
Huh.
So the Time Wars are all about creating the first sentience. Well, we have 72 first species now.
Wow.
And as many as 6,000 different refugee species who've come to live on our world because their worlds are being decimated or destroyed.
Wow. So, from this period, we have a time when the incarnational process has been thoroughly corrupted, and nobody's graduating, and then they're deciding who comes in and who goes, and they're adding fine print to the soul contract. They're also booting incoming souls that are reincarnating in from where they had probably planned out. Oh, I've got this family and I'm going to do this, and then at the last second they're booted over to a dysfunctional family where their life lessons are, pedophilia and drug use and slavery and so on and so forth.
Yep.
Okay.
Bait and switch.
Bait and switch, and so that's been going on for
a long time.
And now we have super soldiers and targeted individuals. It's just it's ramping up, and it's like a spiritual being eating itself.
Yep, cannibals.
Cannibals, and nobody wins in that sense.
Nope. That's why the Prime Creator did the timeout. That's why he did the audit. That's why he's doing the walk-ins.
Yeah, I have said this many times. Less than 15% of those guys will fight to the end. Yeah. And those are the ones who have to take power of their cold dead hand, because they're the characters in this dramatic story that chose to be the ones at the end.
Yeah.
And their legacy and teaching will teach trillions of other beings who are on the verge of being that being at the end, saying, you know what? I don't want that in my Akashic history of being that controlled.
Because again, I don't believe there's anything wrong with the world that we're living in. That world could be a beautiful world if we just made some corrections. We don't have to get off the grid necessarily and run to Timbuktu and reinvent the wheel. Yeah. We've already invented it. But it's just corrupt because there's no shamanic filter to get rid of the toxic people who are now in but don't get me wrong, the people who are at the helm of the world organization structure, governmental, societal ship are not the creators of that ship. The creators of society's great things are geniuses, right? These are the fine, the brains, the scientific and artistic and musical geniuses are the ones who create. Then we use it in the very the way that Nietzsche exposed. Then it's taken over by the middleman, sort of thing. So you don't. Look at the genius of making the big ships that go on the high seas, or the planes that fly in the air. There's nothing wrong with any of that.
No.
It's just that man has become he's lost the direction. He's become very apathetic.
Well, once you get under Tara Hill and you start getting into the deep tunnel systems, these are multidimensional tunnels. You can travel to other worlds via these tunnels. These tunnels were created by the master builders, knowing that their world would be under invasion, physical reality invasion, reality itself altering effects, and that these tunnels had to be immune to tens of millions of types of different warfares that hadn't even been conceived yet. And that's why Earth became Fortress Earth. And that's why this system of domination control has reached its peak now, because we kept fortifying and fortifying and fortifying it because of the invasions that we kept seeing coming and coming and coming by our far-sighted oracles that over 60 million years and 40 million years ago. Ireland is where the far-sighted oracles met in the different sacred spaces so that they could see what soul shards needed to be inside the soul vaults so that the machine itself could start like an engine, like turning on a key and the engine goes dun dun dun, and it starts going. And those soul shards inside there aren't the fuel, they're the cargo until the end. We, the surface, are the fuel, manifesting, co-creating beings in a reality set of rules, trying to function with two layers of sacred geometry grids, one the natural sacred geometry earth grid, and the other the false Masonic sacred geometry grid that was created over many hundreds of thousands of years.
One of the things I'd like to bring up in our talk is the connection between atomic tests and volcanic activity. Because when you go back to the full theory, volcanic activity is manifested by the same forces that they use for an atomic bomb. And the same combinations are interrelated. And now, when you, anybody that will read my books, they'll find it in those polar areas I was talking about. The coordinates from those pole positions to the antenna positions, like the one under the water, it's 2545584412 minutes. Now, that is a reciprocal of the difference between the two Earth fields that I found in my early stages. Now, if you go back to 1883 with the ginormous volcanic activity in Krakatoa, and they call it Rakata, the little group there. Now that was such a massive explosion, it was damn near heard around half the world, and tidal waves, and this thing had just disappeared. It was just nothing left of it. There was so many square miles of matter that got blasted into the stratosphere from there. Now, I got the latitude longitude of that position, which you can on this computer program, and I found that the latitude gave the E value in that unified equation, one of the unified equations for that latitude, and the actual longitude position gave a harmonic of 25455844, which is related to the Earth's magnetic field. So I've known from that time that any volcanic activity, the actual disruption, exact time or timing or close to that timing, is probably related again to the sun position. The Earth and the sun through different time periods come into the exact harmonic positions and passing through, and a volcano will occur or is activated at that time. So this is why every now and then somewhere in the world a volcano would go.
Nuclear explosions.
Yes.
When they started testing nuclear explosions, it wasn't a test. It was purpose. Everywhere there was a nuclear explosion, it was done on purpose to make interdimensional rifts or to kill hollow Earth-based entities or Earth-based entities that live in the astral realms. Oh. All the orbital explosions were meant to destroy whole incoming migration patterns.
Okay.
Completely eliminate them from the astral experience, and many of them can no longer function as energy beings and need to be brought to Venus to triage centers.
Wow.
Where literally soul triage centers can put the pieces parts back together one step at a time.
Isn't there also a factor that if there were enough nuclear explosions that went off on the Earth, that the Earth would be unable to continue functioning?
Correct. Also, if they had done that, they would have had full access to Hollow Earth, the Garthan network. The nuclear explosions, there's an actual website that shows each individual explosion from the 1940s on, and you'll see America has like 5,800 to France's 11 to Russia's 700, and it just shows you all over the world, explosion, and it tells you the altitude or the depth in the Earth. I advise everyone to go use a search engine and find that little graphic of everyone going off. When you physically see that for yourself, you'll realize it's lined up to exactly the grids of Earth. What's the pyramid grid? The pyramid's on the Giza grid.
Right.
It all interacts with that energy.
Right.
All of those explosions are purposely in areas to interaffect the grids of Earth.
Right, right.
And to lower consciousness, destroy consciousness.
Okay, now we've been talking about, volcanic activity. We can now go back to the detonation of an atomic bomb. And close to, or not close to, but one of the near places of atomic tests is Muiroa in New Zealand. And we have volcanic activity in our land. Now we have Ruapehu and Narahoi and other past volcanic activity in the South Island. But I think it was 1995, they had a big test in Muiroa, and just a couple of days later, Ruapehu blew its top. So just out of curiosity, I checked the coordinates between Ruapehu and the latitude of Ruapehu and the bomb position, which I managed to get the exact latitude and longitude. And I found the distance between the bomb detonation and the Ruapehu crater was 2545584412 minutes, which is reciprocal of the value between the two Earth fields. That reciprocal is 3928371. The latitude that passes through the crater is 39.28371 degrees. So we've got both those harmonics hooked up to the mountain and the test place. So that, to me, I've published that actually in my last book. So it proves to me without doubt that not only have we got the war scares and all around the world, people are in fear of atomic detonation, atomic, disintegration. They're destroying the world. And every time they let a bomb off, all those fields are connected. They've got the bomb detonating here, they've got the fields all connected to another position somewhere else in the world. And you're getting earthquakes, and earthquake activity has gone up, I've read, since they started detonating bombs. You've got volcanic activity, it's been more prevalent in the last few years. And all this is happening. Their worth is being destroyed. And I'm pretty sure they don't want, or they don't need atomic bombs for warfare. They can do as much devastation and just ordinary stuff they've got floating around already. They could kill all the world with what they've got. They don't need a bomb. So that's another thing I want to let loose. It's about time that they stopped all this. Put that genie back in the bottle and stop destroying our world. Our ancestors have to live on it.
It was 5 years ago that President Obama was in the neighboring country, the Czech Republic, for a major address in Prague where he called for a world free from nuclear weapons.
So today, I state clearly and with conviction America's commitment to seek the peace and security of a world without nuclear weapons. First, the United States will take concrete steps towards a world without nuclear weapons. To put an end to Cold War thinking, we will reduce the role of nuclear weapons in our national security strategy and urge others to do the same. Make no mistake, as long as these weapons exist, the United States will maintain a safe, secure, and effective arsenal to deter any adversary and guarantee that defense to our allies, including the Czech Republic. But we will begin the work of reducing our arsenal. To reduce our warheads and stockpiles, we will negotiate a new strategic arms reduction treaty with the Russians this year. To achieve a global ban on nuclear testing, my administration will immediately and aggressively pursue U.S. ratification of the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty. After more than 5 decades of talks, it is time for the testing of nuclear weapons to finally be banned.
Well, that was April 2009. Later that year, President Obama's disarmament efforts were cited when he won the Nobel Peace Prize.
You know, Charles Baudelaire, one of my favorite poets, the French poet, said, if a man has merit, what's the use of decorating him?
That's right.
So I've got severe problems why you'd want to get down on your bony little knees and accept any kind of an award from anyone, from the state, from peers, from the Queen of England. Why are you to accept an award from some of these creatures is to endorse their existence.
Yeah.
They should be wiped off the face of the earth. What are you doing accepting awards from them? Don't they have to be in that position for you to give you an award?
Yeah.
And if you take it, aren't you endorsing, oh, you're above me?
Yeah. Indeed.
You see, wonderful. I've matriculated, but this is poured into people from the time of school. You're going to get a star. You're going to be the top of the class. You're going to be a prefect. You're going to get a degree. You're going to graduate. Then you're going to go on and become the head boy. You're going to be the chief executive, the CEO. Look at how these words have commanded people. You're the big noise. You've made millions of dollars. Everyone loves you. Then it turns out they find out you've been a pedophile, or the whole story comes out that you're a drug abuser. How many of these scenarios do people need before they realize that you don't need to decorate those who've already got inner integrity and truth? They don't need your psychophantasm. They don't need your acknowledgement.
Yeah.
They're creative. They're motivated from within. They're not requiring anyone or anything else to give them awards for who they are. Yet we're filled with people hungry for that. The world is full of desperate people that if they're not going to get acknowledgement, you see, from someone. And I see this in athletes. I see this in all sorts of people. I didn't see it in Bruce Lee. So that meaning there are different. You ain't waiting for somebody to hand out the decorations. You know what I mean? I didn't see it in Ayn Rand.
Interesting. Yeah.
But you do see it in the masses of people who are just so desperate for that approval and become neurotic if they don't get it.
Since then, the United States has failed to meet its nuclear promises. In fact, a recent New York Times investigation found the United States is on pace to spend as much as $1 trillion over the next 3 decades to rebuild its nuclear arsenal and facilities. As of 2013, the Federation of American Scientists estimates Russia has about a stockpile of about 8,000 nuclear warheads, while the U.S. has about 7,300. Meanwhile, this week, more than 150 countries at the United Nations signed a joint statement on the humanitarian consequences of nuclear weapons. Nearly 80% of the body's member states. It cited the catastrophic effects of a nuclear weapon detonation, whether by accident or design, and said, quote, "The only way to guarantee that nuclear weapons will never be used again is through their total elimination." The statement also called on nuclear powers to attend the 3rd conference on the humanitarian impact of nuclear weapons scheduled this December here in Vienna, Austria. The United States has yet to attend one of the meetings. Well, for more, we're joined here in Vienna by Elena Sarkova, Executive Director of the Vienna Center for Disarmament and Non-Proliferation. Elena, we welcome you to Democracy Now!
Thank you for inviting me.
There is not a tremendous amount of tension on nuclear weapons. There's a great deal of attention, for example, on the threat of ISIS and Syria and Iraq. But behind the scenes, this expose in the New York Times was quite stunning. The difference between what President Obama was saying just next door here in the Czech Republic in 2009 about a nuclear-free world and what is actually happening.
When I first came in '78, most Americans I spoke to said to me, it's better to be dead than red. And I remember when I first came to America in 1965, I went through immigration. They said to me, "Are you a communist?" I didn't even really know what a communist was, And then so this was this sort of ethic. And I said, "What, you'd rather be blown up in a nuclear war?" "Yeah." I said, "Well, what about the pygmies in Africa? They'll die too." And people said, "Yeah, well, they don't want to be communist either." So I thought, gee, this is sort of psychotic. So then I mobilized with others, 23,000 doctors, and we started describing the medical effects of nuclear war, including a wonderful symposium in LA organized by the Saxons, and another wonderful one in Seattle organized by Judy Lipton, and people were actually scalping tickets at the door. It was so popular. And after, a few years of this, and I was on television because I had a great agent in Hollywood who represented me and put me on with film stars, because no one wanted to hear a boring old doctor talking about nuclear war, but they wanted to see Sally Field and Lily Tomlin. And, after a while, people started to say, well, nuclear war's bad for our health. And then I was even asked to address the annual Morticians Association. And I said, well, what do you want me to talk to you about? They said, well, we don't want to have to embalm radioactive bodies. And I said, don't worry, you'll be one yourself. Because Reagan and Gorbachev met in Reykjavik over a weekend and almost agreed to abolish nuclear weapons. It was the most extraordinary situation. And it failed because Reagan was attached to Star Wars. There was this yellow plastic shield over America, and the weapons would come in and go boink, 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 and bounce off. It would never work. It was Teller's idea, and Teller was mad. Gorbachev knew it would never work, but both men were obstinate. And they came out having almost agreed to abolish nuclear weapons, and they failed. So there's a precedent. And Clinton could have drawn up a document to abolish nuclear weapons in 5 years, and you must know that of the 23,000 H-bombs in the world today, Russia and America own 97%. People go on about Iran, which does not have nuclear weapons, and all the intelligence agencies in America say there's no evidence they have any or intend to build any. And so that's called displacement activity. If you put rats in a cage and threaten them with a lethal situation, they run away and do something irrelevant to that which threatens them. The real rogue nations in the axis of evil are Russia and America, holding the world at nuclear ransom, ready to blow the world up tonight. And we get very close to within seconds of them pressing a button because the computer makes a mistake, or the satellites are set off by a flock of geese or a rising moon thinking America's under attack, or they mistake a weather satellite going up in Norway for an attack on Moscow, and Yeltsin got to within 10 seconds of pressing the button in '95. I don't know how we're still here. And the Chinese are hacking into the early warning system as we speak. And so are young kids, because it's all computerized, for God's sake. And I'll talk about where you sit here today in terms of nuclear weapons, but it's what Kennedy said, our life hangs on a silken thread, the twisting sword of Damocles over our heads every second of every day, and by God we ignore it. Therefore we're mentally sick. And when people are suicidal, we hospitalize them because they're sick. They need help. The whole society's sick. And they're arguing about, I shouldn't really get into this, but women's vaginas and, for God's sake, what the hell are they on about, these stupid men? Stupid men. I mean, I shouldn't be talking about this, but, it's all, what I'm really talking about is etiology. Hands up the physicians in this audience. Yeah, etiology is the cause of a disease, and if you don't diagnose the cause, you can't cure the disease. We can't cure cancer. But the cause of the nuclear pathology infecting the planet is the macrobes, and we are the macrobes, but it's our brains. And it's not our neocortexes, it's our reptilian midbrain. And there are some reptilian midbrains that have a toxic reaction to testosterone. And you can name those reptilian midbrains in the head of Dick Cheney and Donald Rumsfeld and other such characters. The other interesting point, I think, is that 1 in 25 people are sociopaths. Sociopaths are brilliant, charming, erudite, sexy, rise to the top like cream, in any organisation. There were quite a few of them at Harvard, where I worked, medical school. You can see them in corporations, Goldman Sachs. You can see them in government, but they have no moral conscience, none, and they lie with impunity. And they're the ones that rise to the top like cream and run the show. So, and we're reluctant to get into etiology, but the etiology is psychiatric. And unless we are prepared to diagnose the etiology and talk about it, nothing is going to happen. I do think we're an evolutionary aberrant. And I'm not sure how much longer we're going to survive, and we'll take maybe 30 million species with us. But we do have an opportunity because of our innate intelligence. And we use, of course, our neocortex to rationalize what our midbrain wants us to do, don't we? We can rationalize anything. And the other fascinating thing is that in male midbrains, the instincts for violence and sex are very intertwined. And each of those dynamics produces dopamine. And dopamine's like really nice stuff. It's what you get released when you have an orgasm. It's really nice. And apparently violence induces that too, and they're intimately related. And it's very interesting to me, the relationship, I'm totally off track. I'll get on track in a minute. The relationship in the military between sex and violence. Why do they play porno films to blokes who are taking off from aircraft carriers to go and kill people, for instance? Why do men rape women when they conquer a territory and the women have had nothing to do with anything? And so I want to explore this in a book I want to write called Why Men Kill and Why Women Let Them. And the women are really pathetic, I think. We're pathetic. Anyway, so it's time we grew up and became strong. Also, I guess I need to mention that nuclear power is exorbitantly expensive. It costs now $10 to $13 billion to build a nuclear reactor. And you know who pays for that? You do. I do too, because I pay tax here too, which I really resent, because most of it goes to the Pentagon. So you totally pay for the construction, the enrichment, the insurance, everything. You can't insure your house against nuclear power accidents, you can't insure yourself, nothing. But it all comes from your tax dollars. And then the utilities grab the reactor once it's built and pump out the electricity like there's no tomorrow, and they make huge profits. That's why they don't want to close the reactors down, because it's too expensive to build more. Now, the cost of decommissioning or taking apart an old radioactive reactor is beyond compare, much more expensive than building it, and no one's ever done it. And you have to wait till they cool down because they're so terribly radioactively hot. And they have to be taken apart by robots and remote control. It's interesting, at Fukushima, Japan is the leading producer of robots. Yet they had never made robots to withstand very high radiation areas because they always assumed that they wouldn't have an accident. So they had no robots to deal with what they're dealing with now. Isn't it interesting, the psychic numbing that people practice? And we all practice psychic numbing, except children. Children don't. But mummy, why is that? I mean, kids are so honest and alert, and it's only when their hormones, those nasty things, start circulating at menarche that the kids go, they lose it. And they are able then psychologically to block out unpleasant realities. And in my other book, Nuclear Power, The New Nuclear Danger, there's a fascinating study by an anthropologist called Hugh Gustafson, who went to live with the weapons makers in Los Alamos for a year. And he used to drink beer with them in the pub at night and go to church with them. And actually many of them are his dear friends. And their psychology is absolutely amazing. When a man designs a new nuclear weapon that's to be tested in the desert in Nevada, he, that night, goes out and sleeps with the weapon alone in the desert before it's exploded the next day. And he talks about having labour pains, I kid you not, and the need to push. When the weapon explodes, he then talks about postnatal depression. Yeah, isn't that fascinating? So, the emergence of new life, the creation of new life is compared to annihilation in these men's minds. And they talk about people being killed, that's collateral damage. We're inanimate objects, whereas the weapons, they grow whiskers as they get old. They have arms and legs. There's a triad, and they're arms, nuclear arms. And they have all sorts of human characteristics. And it's very important that we as physicians look at the psychology behind what drives these men. Similarly, with nuclear power, the Department of Energy calls solar power and wind power soft energy, like as my father would have said, his name's Cedric and he's got lace on his underpants sort of thing. Dad hadn't grown up at a time when there were gay people. But nuclear power is hard energy. Okay? So there's a fascination with this, combined with the fact that I wrote an article for the New York Times on December 2nd where there was a psychologist in the Department of Defense, can't remember his name, in 52, who said we need nuclear power virtually as a camouflage for the weapons industry, because it's one and the same technology. So kid yourselves not, it's all part of blowing up the planet, which is ultimate power and ultimate instinct for annihilation. Isn't that fascinating? We have to start examining this and getting into the etiology.
A guy called John Braithwaite wrote a book in 1984, ironically, called Corporate Crime in the Pharmaceutical Industry. And he was investigating the outrageous behavior and activity within the pharmaceutical industry as they falsified their studies, falsified their tests, etc., etc. And Braithwaite came up against this incredible dilemma, this dichotomy. And that was that when he met with these chief executives in the confines of their own homes, they were wonderful family men. They were great hosts, very amenable, and a pleasure to be with. But the moment that they got around the boardroom table, they were complete socio-psychopathic bastards. And of course that is not limited to the pharmaceutical industry. It's pretty much be found in the corporate arena.
I don't know how many different permutations you can set up geometrically to detonate a bomb, and there's a lot of them. So therefore, every time you change the permutation, the sun position has to be different for that point overhead for the last trigger. So, but saying that, it shows you that they cannot fight a logical war atomically, because one side can calculate where they can drop a bomb at a certain time, and this comes back to Hiroshima and Nagasaki. They were pre-calculated well beforehand, and they had the top crews in the world all doing bomb drops in the desert for 3 months, dropping bombs into a 300-foot circle. Now, when you think about that practically, why are they doing that? I mean, if it's an atomic bomb, they can drop it over the side dam there over a city, and that's all they need. They didn't have to be that super accurate. But what happens, they had to plan it all, and they had to time the aircraft flying over to a point, and then they got a waypoint. They've got to be there at a certain time, and then they time it in. And when they're overhead at the right, and the sun's moving into a position all this time, when they both knit and the time right, the bomb's dropped. So the first one was Hiroshima, then Nagasaki was next, and they had other places they could say they could drop this bomb on, but they're fogged up. But they didn't go to the alternate, which was Nagasaki, straight away. They were circling and circling and circling. Fighters were trying to get up to shoot them down, but they still stayed circling. And the answer is they had to wait before they come in and come on the time for Nagasaki. And they had to go through that time window. And say logically, well, why fight a war like that? The only way they could fix that one was stuff submarines with missiles. And if one side was stupid enough to start a war, because the other side can pre-calculate when you can do it anyway. It's a two-way system. And they've got computers doing, supercomputers calculating all the time when these bomb positions come up into the future. So both sides know how it's going to work. So, okay, if one side was stupid enough to try it, well, the other side's got submarines with a dozen of these missiles, and they can wait and roam the oceans and then get on a geometric point and blip, off they go. And the parabola is calculated, and they can drop a bomb pretty well on target. And to make sure it works, what they do, they put two heads in it. And probably one of those will do the trick. The others are duds, so it's all probabilities and terminations. So a nuclear war isn't as easy as you think. You just can't let these damn things off any time, anywhere. It's a time thing, and that's how it all works. So that's probably why it hasn't happened. They say about atomic howitzers where they can blast a shell or an atomic thing. They never tested one. And all this pre-calculus and that thing. So again, with terrorism, it would be very hard for somebody with a suitcase bomb to wander into a city and detonate it. They haven't got all the backup that's necessary to do all the work. It's got to be pre-calculated, and you've got to get time in the sun, and it's got to be instant. Well, I don't think it can be done unless it's done the way they're doing it. And another way I checked this was check where the test grounds were and the latitudes and longitudes of test grounds, and you'll find these harmonics. You find the E values and the other harmonics that they're testing these bombs on. And it's all going on. And I personally don't think the atomic testing has got anything to do with war. I think what they're doing is disrupting matter, and it's all going into computers. And they're all getting all these tests about matter, the creation of matter and the dissolution of matter. And if they're going to go into deep space, which we're very, very soon going to do, they're going to be 100% perfect to go into these interdimensional types of fields. If they don't, well, they're going to leave a bit behind. You can't be 99% when you go into one of those dimensional fields, because 1% is going to be part of your system that won't go. So I'm pretty sure that a lot of this secret research and all this stuff is purely space research. It's all going in to get us back into the fold outside. We're going to rejoin the people out in space. They've been here right through history. They've been seeding the world right through history. I think we come from there. All the races come from there. Nothing can explain to me all the different races on Earth, all the colours of our people. We all come from different places. But something happened in the past where we've been cut off. But the outsiders have been watching us and coming back every now and then and doing things that help us along. You'll get brilliant people in the past that stand out, and they give everything a kick. We get a bit more civilized, and they get another kick, and we get a bit more civilized, but we're not civilized enough. And even though we're getting ready, I don't think they're going to let us back out there until we find out how to behave ourselves. And it's very hard to do this in this world. There are too many greedy people that want things that they shouldn't have. So anyway, that's the way that I can see it for the future. We could have a marvellous future if people can realise what we've got. We could change the world within 20 years.
And there's something that you touched on in the last episode that I thought was really important to get some clarity on. You were talking about fear and how the dark T-shirts are basically throwing out all they can at this point, because they know that this is the time when they need to disrupt things.
So let me ask you, since 9/11 happened, September 11th, 2001, what has been the focus of so much of the world? One word. What is that word? Fear. Fear. The point is this, that through our media, we are being conditioned to fear. We're given many things to be afraid of. The environment is changing. New viruses, new diseases are happening. They say there are many bad people in the world, that the weather patterns are changing, and that very bad things can happen in our world. If our focus is what creates the world around us, and this is where our focus is, what kind of world are we creating? But we can change this. You can change it very, very quickly.
Okay. But what they can do is propagate propaganda that makes a certain section of people so fearful that they can create a temporary destruction in their area.
Right.
A volcano, an earthquake. Though I am in this state of understanding that no big destructions will happen unless you create it in your local reality because of mass propaganda and fear, carpet bombing that area.
Mm-hmm.
And then, as we showed in the trailer, highly recommended works of the psychologist Thomas Szasz, The Myth of Mental Illness. I emphasize these people because I believe it's monumentally important when it comes to solutions. And what I'm going to say now, you should listen to like you've never listened to anything else in your life. Because it's very, very important for the people you know, for yourself, and for the people that you're going to meet every day, especially in the coming years. Because everybody's talking about breakdown, everybody's talking about losing the thread, everybody's talking about their depressions. What happens if those depressions, if those feelings of futility, anxiety, whatever, are the closest you or that person have ever been to true selfhood? But that part of the mind, conditioned by all this pestilence that we've been talking about, is making you think that it's not. What happens if your depression is your best friend and your greatest teacher? And we went into this in the 2012 talk in Los Angeles, mentioned it in brief. What happens if your tragedy, your pain, your anxiety, your angst is the closest you have ever come, or that person who's giving you those problems, that laundry list of how they can't handle it, can't keep the job, can't keep the marriage, as if that's all normal? They can't find the harmony and the normality in an abnormal, deeply sick world? Do you know that the door to reality, the gate, is incredibly narrow? I don't want to become biblical with you here. I don't want to preach a sermon, but the way out of this maze is extremely narrow. It's very hard. We're talking very serious stuff here. And we have to turn around, right, and re-examine a lot of what we've been told, even by a lot of the psychologists and the doctors and the so-called experts. What happens if those dark voices that you think are so alien and so foreign and so ghastly are actually there because this is the first time in your life that you've actually even approached the shrine of your own selfhood, your own aloneness, your own stillness. But the chorus of all that other stuff and all the chorus of the experts has you completely thinking the opposite. And so it's big pharma now, and it's drugs, and it's futility, and it's even suicide. Or it's immersion in all the other falseness of the world, thinking that you're now returned to sanity. Now Heidegger already said this about our consciousness, the inauthentic and the authentic man. Because the pain and the so-called tragedy that comes with authenticity has its own beauty. It's in the running away from all of these aspects of yourself that's when the problems arise.
When there is a lot of fear, there's a lot of uncertainty. When there's a lot of uncertainty, there is usually a lot of fear attendant to it. And how people react to fear is interesting. Some people just consume more. They say, I'll get it while I can because it's all going to blow up anyway. They become more and more materialistic. Some people want to be on the right side when the doors close, so they become fundamentalists in one sense or another. They grab on to right as opposed to evil. They want to be one of the 144,000 that gets in the door. And the other group uses it, the uncertainty, as a way to deal with their inner relationship to uncertainty, and they go inward. And you can see the society dealing with the fear that way. And so that real thrust to the kind of righteousness is staying at the plane of good and evil. It's staying at the plane of polarities. And it's not seeing, as G. Manly Hall said, that he who knows not that the Prince of Darkness is but the other face of the King of Light knows not me.